Hello everyone, my name is Hadila Baba. I'm a licensed architect based in Toronto. And for more than 10 years, I've worked primarily in residential and condo development. So you can say throughout my career, I've helped in designing buildings to house communities. And while architecture always fascinated me, there was a question that I couldn't stop asking. Because I solely believe as architects, one of our responsibility is to design and create spaces where people can feel safe, they can feel connected, they can feel that they have some sort of sense of purpose and belonging. Yet, outside of our projects, the conversations that I kept having was about how people felt very lonely, disconnected, anxious, depressed, lack sense of purpose, and I couldn't not stop and ask myself if I feel that this is one of my responsibilities to support the human well being, then what am I missing? Why are we building so many beautiful spaces? And today we have so many innovations, we have advanced ways of building and creating structure, we have beautiful materials, beautiful facades. So we have beautiful buildings that we're designing that are alluring the eye. But yet, why are so many people feeling disconnected from one another? This curiosity wasn't just limited to buildings, to be honest. It wasn't just limited to the physical structures that we built. I was just trying to understand more the invisible layers and the structures that shape the human experience, whether it's in communities, whether it's in organizations, in the movements that we built, in the missions. I was just so curious to understand why are we creating such beautiful brands, such beautiful visions for communities or for movements, but they're not sustaining. Something is breaking, and yet we're still feeling disconnected more than ever. So I became more curious in understanding and questioning what creates trust, what allows people to feel seen, and what is it that really allows communities to thrive. So people can feel like they have some sort of ownership or, care and purpose within the spaces that they belong to. I also, part of my work, I feel I observed how fragmented we are in the processes that we work. I feel that we are working in silos. Different disciplines are working in silos. The decisions are becoming more transactional. We are just focusing on the piece of the puzzle that we carry, right? Rather than taking some steps back and asking larger questions about the kind of communities we're actually creating and understanding how the different pieces of the puzzle that every person carries can connect together for something that's bigger and larger. Eventually, I got tired of asking these questions in the rooms that were not designed to hold them, to be honest. I felt that I was running on the same in the same cycles. I'm repeating the same patterns. And I felt that, okay, it was nobody's fault. I think I created some sort of anger and resentment to certain spaces that I was in. And then I realized that it was nobody's fault. It was just those systems and those spaces that I was in were not designed to just ask these questions. So I just decided to step outside of that, and I created Harmonia. And Harmonia is an ecosystem that I am creating to ask these questions, to create experiences that create harmony between all that we are trying to curate, between the material, between the building, but also between the human being, between the spiritual, between the material, between the doing, the constant performing, but also with the being. And obviously those are things that I can expand on much more at a later stage. Today I want to just focus this conversation on the framework that is called the architecture of community, which is one of the seeds of Harmonia. And architecture of community, I've developed it not because I have the answers, because I'm honestly deeply curious about the questions about what happens when we bring together people from different perspectives, disciplines, and lived experiences to explore the invisible conditions that allow communities to flourish. What can we learn when different people, whether it's architects, developers, leaders, artists, entrepreneurs, sociologists, historians, psychologists, different citizens, just the citizens of the world, of the earth, come together and investigate these questions collectively. What happens? Because we're all navigating the same question, but everyone is, again, trying to solve it from their own lens. So the architecture of community is to create the space where I'm hoping to bring 20 different perspectives and lenses together into this shared room, to this shared space, to talk about the invisible architecture, the invisible conditions that we need to start asking and questioning to be able to translate them to the visible, to be able to translate them to the spaces. So when we enter the space, we can feel something rather than feel like just allure the eye, but still feel disconnected. Because just as buildings rely on the foundations and the structures and the systems that we rarely see, communities also rely on the unseen conditions that shape how people relate to one another. So I believe that we are living through a moment of transition where many of our old paradigm are no longer serving us. And what do I mean by that, right? What is a paradigm? And how does that paradigm translate to a system? Because a paradigm is when enough people gather together, believe a certain story, a certain narrative, and then they start acting accordingly, right? So if we have defined that we are creating some sort of individualism in branding, or the way that we work and we act. Everyone is just focusing on the self. We have created rigid structures. We have leadership that's based on fear and control. We have a lot of disconnect between one another in the teams and the organization. Everyone is burning out. There's hidden power dynamics. Then these things are going to be translated into the systems that are shaping the way we move, we build, we interact with one another. So the systems that we're creating nowadays are extracting life. Now, I believe many of us are realizing that we cannot continue living this way. Something needs to change. Something needs to shift. And it can only change and it can only shift when we become curious. It's not about having the answers. It's not about someone forcing their vision or their solution on the others, but it's about how can we collectively come and be more curious. If our goal and intention is that we want to create systems that create life, then what is needed? What is needed for us to be able to do that, right? What does it mean to build spaces that create stewardship and responsibility? What does it mean to have distributed leadership? What does it mean to have values-aligned cultures? What does it mean to have some sorts of belonging and agencies in the systems that we create? But if we're not starting with the self and we start behaving based on these needs, then how are we going to translate them into a tangible thing? So those are the invisible layers that we need to start focusing and thinking of. Why I say that? Because the relationship of, let's think of the community, and again, like I said, a building or a tree or anything, there's always invisible layers. But it's always the invisible layers that is nourishing the visible layers. So if it wasn't for the roots of the tree, if it wasn't for the soil of the tree wouldn't exist. If the roots and the foundation, the soil of the tree is not nourished, then the tree would not exist. The same thing happens with the community. The visible is the things that we see within our eyes. It's the housings, it's the spaces, it's the buildings, it's the governance, the policies, the people, the events, anything that we can organize and build and we can tangibly see within our eyes. But then the invisible layers that keeps these pieces nourished are often unseen, and they're more felt. They're felt feelings. So those are what basically the invisible forces that shape how we live, work, and communicate together, and they're translated to the culture of the spaces, right? So those are some of the invisible layers. The invisible layers of how are we relating to the land, to the space where the land was built on, right? How are we participating? Because a lot of people these days, they feel like they want to contribute to the spaces that they're in, but they don't feel like we're lacking some sort of ownership. And when we lack some sort of ownership, in my perspective, we then lack some sort of responsibility and accountability. We stop having responsibility and accountability to how our interactions or our being in the spaces can create some sort of influence. So again, I'm not gonna go through them today. Today is just really briefly to walk you through what goes inside my thoughts and my thinking process, and what I'm hoping to expand more in the experience of the architecture of the community. One of the things that I also noticed and I observed is that often, and this is the importance of language really, we're often speaking the same thing using different languages. And if we think about it from, like the different regions or the different countries, different cities, they have their own unique language. But then at the end of the day, I feel like we're all saying the same thing, but we're not being curious enough as human beings to pause and to really listen beyond the words that we're using. We use certain words and right away these words disconnect us from understanding more what the other person is saying, just because the terms itself might feel foreign to us, to our ears. So a lot of people have asked me if I'm spiritual, and I ask, what does that mean? I am a human being. I might be using some spiritual language or frames or phrases. I resonate more with that type of expression. I resonate more with the indigenous lens. I resonate more with lenses that are not too corporate. But that doesn't mean I'm not speaking also the same language that the corporate is trying to talk and to say. But I'm just using different languages because the roots, the common thread between underneath all these things and underneath all these lenses is that we're all seeking for meaning. We're all seeking for belonging. We're all seeking for relationship. We're all seeking for repair, trust, and care. And most importantly, we're all longing for love. So it doesn't matter how we the foundation is the same. The thread is the same. Just the way that we express is differently. So my invitation is to always remain curious into the spaces and the conversations that you have, because often the most beautiful insights and the most beautiful experiences and transformation happens when you expand your perspective beyond your lens. What happens when you actually come into spaces to be with people that are different? We speak about wanting to create diverse spaces. We talk about wanting to create inclusive spaces. But what does that mean? Right? How are we translating inclusiveness and diversity into the spaces that we inhabit and we are co-creating together? Is inclusiveness just about its marketing tools and words that we're putting? Or is it about engaging from different lenses, from different social class? Why the leaders always have to sit with the leadership team to come up with a solution? Why are we not sitting with the people that are just starting their work and see their perspective? Because they have a fresh perspective. They have a fresh eye of seeing things. So we can learn from them. So that's when I say everything is siloed and fragmented, but yet we are seeking and we're saying we want this. But how are we translating that into actual form? So this is my understanding of why systems break. And again, they break, and not just when I talk about systems, I'm talking about whether it's organizations, communities, relationships, anything, any system. It breaks because the invisible layers have not been watered enough. There isn't a strong foundation to hold what is being co-created on the top. And that's often because we have unspoken expectations, there's unclear boundaries, there's hidden hierarchies. We're always fearing conflict. And when we fear conflict, we fear sitting with the uncomfortable of having an honest conversation. We are performing rather than participating and being present. And that's creating to burning out. And that's creating, when we're burning out, we're disconnecting. And there is no shared vision and purpose that we feel is connecting us together to work together towards a shared goal or shared vision or shared purpose. What I'm realizing also is that many of us are fearing the word hierarchy, especially the younger generations. We are fearing structure, we're fearing hierarchy just because we are seeing the blueprints of, the blueprints that where we are today, and we're rejecting them. But in my perspective, hierarchy isn't the problem. Unconscious hierarchy is, because in a way, hierarchy is needed, but not in a way that it creates dominance, and not in a way that it creates power over the people. That's not hierarchy. It's more about creating clarity about the roles of people in different in the dynamics of an organization or a community or any kind of relationship. And hierarchy, it exists to serve the whole, not the self. And what do I mean by that? The leadership is not about being the leader to create more followers and inspire followers. Leadership, you have this hierarchy, and you have this role of being a leader to inspire others to find their own inner compass and their own inner leader within themselves. And it's serving the whole project or the whole community, not to serve your intention of wanting your desires to be accomplished, to say that you created something. So hierarchy becomes conscious when we start identifying the roles. They're becoming clear and they're not being rigid. When the leadership is in service to the whole, when power is held with responsibility, and when roles evolve as systems evolve, not by climbing the ladder. So I feel like I've given a glimpse of some of the thoughts that emerge and some of the things that I'm thinking about. And the whole experience is about trying to, again, as I mentioned, to bring the different perspectives together, because I would love for us to reimagine community. What principles would we want future communities, organizations, and systems to embody? And these answers are not just going to come from one lens. They need to come from a collective lens. So I would love for... this is just the experience. This is some of the process of how the experience is going to unfold. So I would love for you to, if any of what I shared doesn't resonated with you, then I would sincerely love to have you in the container together. The conversation is, we're going to have 3 live workshops. So we're going to have Monday, June 15th, Wednesday, June 17th, and then on Friday, the 20th. I hope I got the dates correct, but what I know for sure, it starts Monday, June 15th, and it's going to be a 90-minute workshop. And every session, we're going to be exploring 2 themes. And then on Friday, we're going to see where we arrive with these reflections, because we're also going to have an offline reflection space where we can continue these reflections if anything emerges, or any thoughts or any ideas, or anyone wants to share some of their work together. And then I'm going to be gathering all this information to see how can we translate everything that emerged from Monday to Thursday into Friday's workshop. So I really hope to see you, whoever feels called to be part of this pilot experience, and for you to share your perspective and lens with us. Until then, I hope you have a beautiful day ahead, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback and some of the questions that emerged while you were listening to me present some of those thoughts and ideas with you. All right, ciao.